Welcome to Lesson 17 in Through the New Testament in Ancient Greek for Absolute Beginners. My name is Helena Stay, and I'm your guide as we read through the New Testament in its original, beautiful language, the language of ancient Greece, which coincidentally was called Helena Stay. Because each lesson will build on previous lessons, be sure to start with Lesson 1. In today's lesson, we're going to read through Matthew 7, verses 15 through 29, which is a continuation of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. It is also its conclusion. He talks about a tree and its fruit and the house on the rock. And as we go through these verses, we are also going to do a review of our definite articles. We're also going to touch on personal pronouns and relative pronouns. And we're going to briefly introduce demonstrative pronouns and reflexive pronouns, and really quickly touch on indefinite and interrogative pronouns. So we're mainly going to review articles and pronouns today. Let's read these verses. Pros ekete apaton pseudopropheton, hoitines erkantai pros humas en endumasin probaton, esose de Asin lukoi harpages, apaton carpon auton epigonosesthe autus, meti sulegusin apa akanthon staphulas, apatribolon suka, hutos pan dendron agathon, carpus kalus poie. Tade sapran dendron, carpus ponerus poie. Udunatai dendron agathon, carpus ponerus poien. Ude dendron sapran, carpus calus poien. Pandendron me poiun, carpan kalan, ekoptetai kai espur balatai. Arage apaton carpon auton, epigonosesthe autus. All right, so let's just quickly give an overview of all the various articles and pronouns. First, as we remember, in Greek, there is only one kind of article, the definite article. And the definite article in English only has one form, and that is the. Okay, so here is our article. And in Greek, we have ha, he, ta as the nominative singular forms. And we have a lot of other forms depending on the use of the word that the is coming in front of. So ha, he, ta are just our nominative singular. So the article is sometimes used as a pronoun. So that's why I kind of group them together. But usually it's paired with a noun to indicate the person, the Son of God, indicating a specific noun. And it's used a lot more commonly in the New Testament and ancient Greek because it goes along with like names. We'll sometimes have the John instead of just John. Names will have it, specific nouns. And then also sometimes just like in English, if you're referring to just one, there's only one in the world, like the God. That's called a monomic use. That would be another reason for using the definite article. But there's actually a lot of other reasons. But the article sometimes will be by itself, which would mean that it's actually in place of a personal pronoun. So instead of saying it, you might just say ta instead of saying auta. But anyway, so I'm going to throw that in there just so we can remember. There's an article. Plus, there's these 5 different pronouns, and I have these naming conventions. So the R here is relative pronouns, and in English that would be who or which or that or whose or whom. Those usually are used in front of a relative clause. So in front of a relative clause, for example, the woman who is the mother of Jesus is named Mary. So a relative clause here would be who is the mother of Jesus. So we'd use who. Or the house which we are in belongs to John. So that would be a use of which. For the house is actually going to be feminine. So it would be he. But ha here is going to be neuter, which will be for neuter objects, obviously. So the next thing we have is P, which is our personal pronouns. And we've already covered these. Personal pronouns stand in for a person. So instead of saying my own name when I'm talking about myself, I say I. And instead of saying your name, which I could do, I usually just say you if I'm talking to you. And then we have he, she. These are also it when it's an object that's masculine, and it's it if it's an object that's feminine. And then if it's an object that's neuter, you'd use auta. And these are, of course, nominative forms. There's going to be genitive, dative, and accusative, both singular and plural. We'll talk about these too. But that's called a personal pronoun because it stands in for a person or actually an object if we're talking about objects. All right, the next thing I want to point out here is this F. Now, F stands for reflexive. R was already taken by relative pronouns. So the reflexive pronoun is, in English, we would say myself. Like I tell myself, or I remind myself, or I wash myself, etc. Those things that you do to yourself is basically equivalent here. It would be emautu, sayautu, heiautu. Notice the rough breathing mark. Heiautes and heiautu. And we'll talk about those in more detail too. But these are when you're doing it to yourself. So it's a reflexive. It comes back on the subject. All right. And then we have I, which is our indefinite, also interrogative. They share the same forms. They just have different accent placements. So our indefinite objects were tis and ti. We've covered this in previous lessons, but we're not going to talk about it too much in this lesson at all, except for right now. But tis and ti are the nominative forms for masculine and feminine, one form, and then neuter is T. And then notice this accent here. When it's interrogative, you have an accent. And also in some other forms, like for example, tinas. If it's an indefinite form, you would actually change it to tinas in the interrogative form. So the accent will move over when it becomes an interrogative. So if it doesn't have an accent, it gains one when it becomes a question. And if it does have an accent, it kind of moves to the previous syllable. So examples of English translations would be the one who, the one that, or whoever, whatever, whomever, the thing that. So we'll see that often going forward, but not in these verses that we're studying today. And then in the interrogative, the translation would be who or what or which or why, sometimes why. Those are all different ways of using tis and ti in the other forms. All right, and then last we have this D, which stands for demonstrative. And we haven't talked about this before. And by the way, these colors have to do with the colors up here. Some of us remember by colors. Oh yeah, there were 6 colors. So there's 1 article and 5 pronouns. So in this case, it's dirt, the color of dirt, demonstrative. We have the near demonstratives and the far demonstratives. Just like in English, we have near and far. So indicating something closer to you, you would say this or that, depending on whether it's far. So I like this one, but not that one. In Greek, you have the same. For the near, you have hutas, haute, tuta, or toot. This is before vowels. So before a vowel. And then the far is akanos, akane, akanos, a masculine, feminine, neuter. And we'll see more of that in the future. But I just want to point out all of the various kinds of pronouns because it gets a little confusing keeping them all straight. So my little mnemonic device, if you want to remember it, is ARPFID. ARPFID. Article, relative, personal, reflexive, indefinite/interrogative, and demonstrative. So let's point out 3 examples of definite articles in these first 6 verses. Beware of apa, and then after apa, we have the genitive. That's why we have genitive masculine plural to match the genitive masculine plural pseudo-propheton, false prophets. Pseudo, by the way, is common in English. So pseudo usually means something that's not quite real. Pseudo. Pseudonym, for example, is not your real name. It's another name you've taken on for a book or so forth. So we have tone, pseudo-propheton. And notice how that kind of matches. It doesn't always match, but in the genitive plural, you most times will see this tone, no matter what the gender of the word is. So from beware of the false prophets. And then we come down here again, by their fruits. And fruits is also masculine, plural, carpone. So by the fruits of them, tone, carpone, autone. Very poetic. And then again, the same exact thing, by their fruits. Let's move on to personal pronouns. So in these verses, we have beware of the false prophets who come to you. So pros, humas. Towards you, using pros, is followed by the accusative. So you, plural, in the accusative is going to be humas, which is down here. All right, so humas, pros humas, who come to you in clothing of sheep. Inwardly, however, they are ravenous wolves. Okay, by their fruit, you will know them. Okay, so after knowing, you have an object, which is them. So autus, and in this case, it's generic, both male and female, so that would be masculine plural, autus. If we were talking about just females, which of course are not the only types of false prophets, it would be autas, but in general, males and females together, you would just use autus. All right, then we can come down here, the fruits of them. Again, we have autone, which is the same in all genders. Quite easy. That's why I colored all green. All right. And remember, only the male and neuter and the singular are the same. All right. So their fruits, tone, carpone, autone. And then finally, you will know them. We have autus again. Now let's look at the relative pronouns. Now, this is the first time we've really talked about relative pronouns, but here we have one. So let's take advantage of this opportunity to discuss them. So rel pro, here it's nominative masculine plural, referring to the subject of this clause. So who is it that comes to you in sheep's clothing? Oh, it's these false prophets. Now notice we're describing the false prophets, which is masculine plural, but the relative clause, it becomes the subject of. So it switches to nominative. All right, so hoitinus, those false prophets, come to you in clothing of sheep. So the hoitinus is nominative because they're the ones that are coming. All right, so it doesn't take on this genitive. Just be careful. It becomes the subject of a new clause. All right, this is a descriptive clause to describe those false prophets. So we have down here hoi or hoitinus. Now notice that this hoi is the same as the definite article. So sometimes you can just use the definite article to introduce that relative clause, hoi. But here they add hoitinus, those who. So that's an example. But since we haven't covered this yet, let me just read through these so you can hear them. Hos or hostis, he, notice that's the same as the definite article, hatis, ha. Now remember the definite article in neuter is ta. So when it's just ha by itself, it sounds like the definite article for the masculine. So it's a little bit confusing. And now this is very similar to the definite article, which would have a ta, but we don't have the ta. And we also don't have, it's not ooh, it's going to be who, almost like who, but the English translation here would be whose, right? Because it's a possessive. If you're talking about possessive, there's other reasons to use the genitive. And then we have haste. Definite article also has this tau. So we'll take off the tau for the relative pronoun. And then who again. So those are always going to be the same. And then we have ho, hey, ho. This should have a little iota subscript. Sorry, that's a mistake. It indicates dative, so it's kind of helpful there. And then han, hain, ha. And notice these are always going to be the same. Neuter, nominative, and accusative. And then these two are going to be the same in these two. And then we have hoi, hi, ha. Hon, hone, hone. Hois, heis, hois. Hus, has, ha. All right, let's go ahead and read Matthew 7, verses 21, 22, and 23. U pas ha legon moi, kurie, eseleusetai esten basilean ton uranon. Al ha poion ta thelema tu patras mu, tu en tois uranois. Paloi erusin moi, en ekene te hemera, kurie, utoso anamati, epraphetu samen, kaitoso anamati, daimonia exebalamen, kaitoso anamati, dunames palas epoiesamen, kaitate hamalageso oites hati, udepate egnon humas, apakorete apemu, hoi ergazamenoi tein anamian. All right, so in these 3 verses, we have a lot of definite articles. So lots more to review here. So not everyone saying to me. All right, in this case, this is very similar to our relative pronoun. So it basically could be almost a relative pronoun. It is everyone who is saying to me. All right, so pas ha legon. It also could be the article for the saying, the one saying. So legon here is a participle. It could be substantively used. So it's basically the person who is saying, the one who is saying. So not everyone who is the one saying to me, Lord, Lord. Notice here, this is the vocative case. And we have 5 cases altogether. We usually only list nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. But the vocative case is also a case, but it's so rare, we don't really point it out. Usually it ends with the E. So it's curios in the nominative, and then it changes the os to e with the epsilon. So that's the vocative case. So not everyone saying to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of the heavens. It's not just any kingdom, it's the kingdom of not just any heavens, but the heavens. So tein basilean ton uranon. But the one doing, just like we have the one saying, but the one doing. This is kind of a difference between just being a person of words or a person of actions. All right. So you shouldn't just be saying, Lord, Lord, but actually following up if he is your Lord, doing what he wants you to do. So ha poion is the one doing. The will of the Father. Here we have a neuter. So that's why we have ta instead of ha. So ta thelema, to of the Father. Note genitive masculine singular to go with the genitive masculine singular patros, mu. And then who is, now here, this is actually an article. It's kind of used as a relative pronoun again. So sometimes the article is intermingled. It's kind of put in place. Tu entois uranois. So it's actually also kind of, I think of this article as glue that glues this, the one in the heavens, to what it's modifying. So it's kind of a glue that sticks this little descriptive phrase to the patros. All right. Paloi, many will say to me in that day. We'll talk about ekene soon, but that day is feminine. So hemera is going to be te hemera, in that day. Following n, we have dative. And then Lord, Lord again, vocative. Not, here again, we have oo, which usually when you're doing a question that has oo in it, it means that the answer is expected to be yes. So usually if you were going to ask a question you expected the answer to be no, you would use may. But if you expect the answer to be yes, you use oo to negate it. So in your name, did we not prophesy? So in your name. So it's a specific name. In English, we wouldn't use the article, but in Greek you do. So ou to so anamati, and notice we don't have to use the preposition en here because it is understood in the dative that you're talking about in your name. Did we not prophesy in your name? And toso anamati, daimonia exebalamen, and did we not cast out demons in your name? And so on and so forth. So this to is going to be modifying name along with so. And then last one, and he's going to say to those people, depart from me, I never knew you. So only those working, here's another participle. So this P in the middle is the one that indicates participle. Ergazamenoi. those are going to be the ones working. So here again, we have a participle used as a noun. Usually it's an adjective, but in this case, the people that are working, he's calling these people the ones that are working unlawfulness, but that's basically doing evil things or things that are not pleasing to God. All right, so again, here are all of our definite articles, and you can see how they're used throughout these verses. All right, so let's check out the personal pronouns in these verses, of which there are quite a few. So not everyone who is saying to me. So to me is going to be dative first person singular. So first person singular dative, we have emoi or moi. All right, so he used moi here. Kurie kurie. And then down here, my father, genitive first person singular. So here we are, emu or mu. And then again, they will say to me is again dative, to me is moi. And then in your name. Now here, it would be, usually it's soy. We talked briefly about last time how there is something similar. And I would think of it as more of an adjective. So is another way of saying to you. Using the adjective sa, se, son. And then your name and your name again underneath here. And then we have, I will declare to them. So that's dative, masculine, third person, plural. And now remember, these guys are going to be the same. So it's either masculine or neuter. But obviously, if you're talking to people, it's going to be autois. If it was just women, you would say autais. So that's why it's autois. I will declare to them, both men and women, I never knew you. Ude pate egnon humas. So again, the object of knowing is you, plural. So we're going to be here, accusative, second person, plural. And then depart from me. Apemu. So sometimes emu is kind of an emphasis. I want you to depart from me. But also it might sound better before apemu instead of apamu. All right, so before we get into the demonstrative pronouns, first of all, I put far first. Probably should have put near first because it's nearer. But the far ones are first here, and these are the near ones. So the far ones are that, of or from that, to or for that, and that is an object. And then as those is the plural in English. So I'll go ahead and read these. It's ekenas, ekene, ekena, ekenu, ekenes, ekenu, ekeno, ekene, ekeno, ekenan, ekenain, ekena, ekenoi, ekenai, ekena, ekenon, 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 ekenois, ekenais, ekenois, ekenus, ekenas, ekena. It has all the same patterns that we usually see with the neuter, nominative, and accusative matching each other in both the singular and the plural, and with the masculine, genitive, and neuter matching, and the dative, masculine, neuter matching. And then also all of the three different forms for the three different genders in the genitive plural are the same. And then we have the same for the masculine dative plural and the neuter dative plural. All right, so those are the far demonstrative pronouns. Now we have near. We have hutas, haute, tuta, or toot before a vowel. Tutu, tautes, tutu, tuto, taute, tuto, tuton, tautain, tuta, or toot before a vowel. Hutoi, hautai, tauta, tutone, 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 tutois, tautais, tutois, tutus, tautas, tauta. And again, with the colors, you can see the similar patterns. So just so you kind of remember the ones that are the same, it just makes life so much easier if things don't have to be memorized separately. All right, so having seen that, let's go ahead and look at our verses and see what we have. We have just the one, ekene, that day. You don't just say that day, you say that, the day. So it's kind of repetitive, you'd think, but ekene te hemera. So emphasis on that day. And basically, I think what Jesus is referring here is the day of judgment. On the day of judgment, he's going to say to those people who said they thought they were serving him that he didn't know them. So remember, it's not just you doing works for him, it's you having a personal relationship with the Lord. Make sure that's the first thing. Let's go ahead and read Matthew 7:24 through 27. Pas un hostis acue mu tus lagus tutus kai poie autus hamoio thesitai andri franimo hostis okadamesen autu ten oikian epiten petran kai katebe he brake kai elthan hoi patamoi kai empnusan hoi anemoi kai prosepesan te oikia ekene kai uk epesen tethemeliota gar epiten petran kai pas ha akuon mu tus lagus tutus kai me poion autus hamoio thesitai andri moro hostis okadamesen autu ten oikian epiten aman kai katebe he brake kai elthan hoi patamoi kai epnusan hoi anemoi kai pros ekapsan te oikia ekene kai episan kai ein he ptosis autes megale. All right, let's first look at the definite articles in these verses. Here's our chart down here if you need reminding. But here, everyone who hears my words. So here, these words of mine. So it's a lot of words to say what we would say in English, just my words. But to emphasize these words, the one he just was speaking in this whole Sermon on the Mount, those who hear the words of me, these. So acue mu tus lagus tutus. All right, so we have the article tus, accusative, because it's the object of hear. And it modifies words, which is masculine plural. So we have tus, accusative masculine plural. And then here we have, he built his house. So it's autu tein oikian. Now, sometimes you could say tein oikian autu, which is also acceptable. Here it's probably an emphasis on his house. He's building his own house. Tein oikian, accusative feminine singular to match accusative feminine singular from, this is the word for house, oikia. So oikian, tein oikian. That's why we have this, accusative feminine singular. And then upon the rock, again, after a P, when you're on, it's going to be accusative. So tein petran, and rock is also feminine. Interesting. So rock is a feminine, even though Peter, the name, is a male's name. All right, so epitein petran. And then, and the rain came down. He broke, the rain. So nominative feminine singular as the subject of came down. And the torrents, or patamoi, is also rivers. So the rivers or torrents came, hoi patamoi, masculine plural, subject, so it's nominative. And the winds blew, so the nominative masculine plural is the subject of blew. And notice again in Greek, the subject can easily come after the verb. So, and blew the winds and beat the house. Okay, so the winds, hoi anemoi, that's how we get animated. It's something to do with the wind. And then when, again, on the house. So the winds beat on the house. So here, when you're talking about beating, in this case, it's upon the house, or it's actually going to be the dative following that. So if you're confused why it's dative instead of accusative, it's sometimes after certain verbs that you'll have the dative instead of the accusative. So te oikia ekene. And then here, upon the rock, here we have accusative. Again, upon the rock, upon the rock. And then everyone who is hearing, so the one hearing, ha is why we use that here, similar to previous verses. These words, tous lagus. So again, tous for accusative masculine plural. And then again, the torrents and the rain and the, I missed this one, tain. These are kind of all repeated. Notice here is a foolish man. This doesn't have a definite article because it's in general. He will be likened to a foolish man, similar to our English uses. We just use a. But here you just don't use any article at all to indicate that it's not a specific foolish man, but in general, he will be likened to a foolish man. All right. And then we also have, again, take, oikia, and was the, and great was that destruction is another feminine word. And personal pronouns in these verses, we have he does them. So you listen to the words and you do them. You do what Jesus says. So them is referring to the words. So it's logos is a masculine noun. So it's going to be accusative, masculine, third person plural, because it's the object of doing. Poieo being the lexical form here. Again, we'll build his house. So his is always going to be autu if the person who owns it is male. Basically here we're referring to males and females. So his house will be autu. Okay, even though house is feminine, it's going to match the gender of the person who owns it, of him, just like we do in English. All right, and then down here, we have my words. Anyone hearing my words? My is going to be genitive first person singular. So it's either emu or mu. And then not doing them, again, it's the same thing. Doing them, the words. Doing words, it's kind of interesting. You don't really do words, but you do what the words tell you to do, right? And then here again, his house is going to be autu tein oikian. Autu tein oikian. And then again, here is the fall of it. So here, of it is referring to the house. Because it's feminine, you can say its house's fall was very great. A lot of Bibles translate as destruction. All right, in these verses, we have several examples of demonstrative pronouns, both near and far ones. So here, tutus. Tutus is our accusative masculine plural. And again, remember, it modifies the words, just like tus here. And notice how instead of just tus for the article, you have tutus. And then we have down here, we have tutus again to indicate these words. So not just my words, but these words of mine that I just said. All right. So probably not just the Sermon on the Mount, but all of the words that Jesus says are important to determine whether our house will stand or not. And then ekene is an example of a far demonstrative. And in this case, it's a feminine dative because they beat on the house, upon the house. So here, ekene doesn't mean upon, but to help us understand how it's being used, this is actually the te. So it's not really that. It's really the house, that. And because it's in the dative, we know that it's beating upon, because it takes, after this beating, you take the dative in order to indicate that it's beating kind of towards or to or on that house. So te oikia ekene. So the house that, just basically is a way of saying it literally in English. And in Greek, it just means that house, beating on that house. All right. So those are some examples of our near and far demonstrative pronouns. And we have come to our last two verses for this lesson. Let's go ahead and read them. Kai egeneto hate etelesen ha Jesus tus lagus tutus. Exeple santa hoi akloi epi te didake autu. Ein gar didaskon autus hos exousian ekon. Kai hos hoi grammates auton. So pointing out the definite articles, we had, it came to pass, kai egenito. This is that kind of archaic way of saying it in English. It came to pass. We don't really have anything in modern English. I used to say, and then it happened that, but we don't really say that in English so much, but it's very common in Greece. And then it came to pass that when Jesus finished, hate etelesen ha Jesus, these words. So when he finished these words, basically this is referring to the Sermon on the Mount, which is we've been studying for quite a few chapters here. So tous lagus tutus, hoi akloi, the crowds, nominative masculine plural, the subject of this sentence, and nominative masculine plural, definite article. So then we have epi te didake autu, at the teaching of him. So on the teaching. So they were astonished at his teaching. Epi here is used figuratively. It's not like they were astonished on top of his teaching, but here epi means basically concerning his teaching. They were really astonished at how amazing his teaching was. So at the teaching, we have dative following epi, and te is going to be your dative. Ein gar didaskon autus. So basically, he was teaching them as having authority, as though he had authority. Basically, he was not referring to what the Bible teaches. He was just directly teaching them. He was the source of the Bible. And not as the scribes. So it's not like the scribes didn't have authority. They were certainly authoritative in that time, but they were referring to what the Bible told them to say. And Jesus was basically just telling them straight up, this is what you do. And then not as the scribes taught them. So that's why it's nominative, because the scribes are basically also, he's comparing, the crowd is comparing what Jesus taught to what the scribes taught, which is putting them in that nominative position. So that's why you have hoi again. All right, and then the personal pronouns here, basically it's just teaching of him, so his teaching, autu. And then we have their scribes, so plural there, so we have auton. And because it's a mix of, probably most people in the crowd were males, but I'm sure there were females too, so it's a mix, so you still use auton. Even though if it was all females, it would still be auton. And our demonstrative pronouns, we have tutus. So that's a near demonstrative, meaning these words. You often use this, just like in English, to refer to something that just happened. So the crowd was astonished that these words, the Sermon on the Mount, were so impressive, so authoritative. So that's why it's tutus, not just any words, but the ones he just said, the words these. So again, in English, we would just say these words, but in Greek, they like to be really particular and have tous lagus, tutus, emphasizing it's the words and they're just these words that he just said. So that brings us to the end of lesson 17. Congratulations on making it so far. We've gone through Matthew 1 through 7 at this point. So hang in there. We are going to learn so much over the next few weeks. And I hope you're enjoying it. I certainly am. And I look forward to next time.